Hi, I'm H.M. Bouwman, and I'm here today to talk to you about my book, A Tear in the Ocean. I'm here at the Anderson Center in Red Wing as part of the 2020 Minnesota Children's Book Festival. Both of these books, so A Tear in the Ocean is a follow-up to A Crack in the Sea. Both were published by Penguin Random House, and A Tear in the Ocean came out in 2019. Both of the books they're different stories, but they're both set in the same world, a world with magic and, as you might guess from the cover, lots and lots of water. When I wrote A Tear in the Ocean, I wanted to play with some fairy tales, and I was thinking a lot about how important, how meaningful fairy tales are to so many people. We keep retelling them. Think of how many times you've heard the Cinderella story over the years and how many different ways it's been retold. These stories just never disappear. But I didn't want to retell a fairy tale in this book. I wanted to tell a story about these three characters, Artie, Putnam, and Raelle, who are not fairy tale characters, but who are floating in a sea of fairy tales, you might say. When I was a kid, my sisters and I had a picture on our wall that was a print by the artist Jero Hess. It was called The Land of Make-Believe. This picture is about 75 or 80 years old. My grandfather made the frame for it about 75 years ago, and it hung in my mom's room with her brothers when they were growing up, and then it hung in my room, and then it hung in my children's room when they were growing up. In that picture, which is really kind of a map, all of the fairy tales, Mother Goose stories, famous fantasy stories, folk tales, fairy tales, are all kind of mashed together in one picture. And there's a road that goes all the way around that connects all of these stories. So you can go from Little Red Riding Hood's house to visit Peter Pan, to the Emerald City where Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz were. You can travel this whole road and connect all of these stories. And you might find a castle or an ocean of sea monsters as you go along. And I wanted to create a world in my book with that kind of possibility. Today I'm going to read a short section from A Tear in the Ocean, and it's from the middle of the book. What you need to know before you hear this section is that Artie, that's the girl right here, Artie has run away from a really difficult and traumatic home life. And she has met up with Putnam, who's right here, who's also run away from home, but for really different reasons. They're in a boat, and they come to an island. When they get to this island, they split up and explore, and Artie decides that this island, which is deserted, would be perfect for her to live on, far away from anyone who would bother her, really peaceful, really safe. But she needs to find a home to live in, and winter is coming, so she needs something warm and secure. As she's walking around the island, she finds a cave. And it's warm, and it's dry, and it looks like the perfect place to live, and it feels like the universe is telling her that this will be her new home. So I'm going to read this section. There is a fairy tale that is kind of buried in this little section of the story, and as you listen, I think you might figure out what it is, probably before I get to the end of the reading. As the cave slowly appeared before Artie's eyes, she liked what she saw. Straight, dry walls and a smooth floor and ceiling. This cave was old but sturdy, not in danger of collapsing, and the entryway was high enough that a bonfire laid there would provide some heat without sucking out all the oxygen. But maybe she wouldn't even need a fire to make it through the winter if the cave went far enough in and stayed warm enough on its own. Already, only a few feet in, it felt warmer than outside. She put her hand on one of the smooth walls and walked slowly into the darkness, sliding her feet carefully along the ground. Around the curve, the cave was dark, but not completely black, as there was a small opening high up that let in some light and some air, which was good. A little farther on, she could hear the musical tinkle of water, and she kept following the curve and the slight downward bend of the tunnel to find a small dribble, a tiny spring that popped out of the wall from a spout, pooled in a basin about 2 feet across and drained slowly back into the cliff. The whole area of the cave widened there, as if to make a kitchen for her, a low, flat rock in the corner standing like a table. A thin shaft of light fell on the table from a vent above. The water in the tiny spring gurgled. Scooping her hands under the spout, she tasted it. Sweet. She lowered her head and drank deeply. Perfect. Then she moved on, following the curve of the cave into shadows, a gradual downward spiral, it seemed, thinking what all this meant. This cave could not be better suited for a human to live in, for her to live in. She felt as if it had been waiting for her. As she followed the downward coil of the tunnel, the light waned to almost complete darkness, but she could see something before her, around the curve, another little bit of light ahead. She crossed her fingers and made a wish, which she never did, never. But something about this place seemed almost magical, so she wished. What she needed now was a cozy bedroom, where she could pile some straw and spend the winter in comfort. With a bedroom, the place would be perfect. When she turned the corner, another high skylight overhead showed her that what she had wished for did indeed exist. It was a bedroom, small and cozy and already completely lined with a thick layer of straw, the dried grasses piled up high and warm, like magic. And in the middle of the straw, 2 hollows, as if 2 bodies had napped there. Large bodies. So large, in fact, that sleeping bodies couldn't be what the dents came from. People didn't take up that much room, not even if they were enormous grown-ups. Artie stood perfectly still at the juncture where the tunnel ended, and the little room opened up like a fist at the end of an arm. Why the dents in the straw? Why the straw at all? Up until now, she could tell herself that the cave just happened to be here in this condition, that she was just finally lucky. The clean cave, the openings at exactly the right places, the warmth even without a fire, the big stone like a table, but a bed, and a bed that looked like it had been slept in. She felt her heart beating in her throat. She felt suddenly like she could hear the walls breathing. Slowly, she backed up. And then she heard something. A shuffling, like feet padding gently along a cave floor, and breathing, loud breathing, almost panting, as if something much bigger than she was, or maybe there were simply more of them, was moving toward her. The noise didn't come from behind her. It came from somewhere in front of her, from the bedroom. No, from behind the bedroom. She peered into the shadows and then saw it across from her, a crack, an extra corner barely visible in the half-light. The bedroom had another entrance, and someone was coming toward that entrance. She stood frozen for a couple seconds longer. She told her feet to move, but they did not move. What was coming toward her felt like everything she'd run away from, and now it was about to get her. It had followed her across the ocean. She almost imagined she knew who was coming toward her, but she didn't know. He couldn't have followed her. This was a new danger, but it felt exactly like old danger, like danger she knew, and she couldn't make her feet move, and she couldn't get away. Go. It was a whisper, but a loud one. It came from her own mouth. Immediately, the panting stopped, like the thing was listening, had heard her. And then the feet padding started up again, this time louder and faster, and the panting filled her ears. She turned and ran as fast as she could, up the cave and out into the cold air, scrambling over the rocks to the top of the cliff, the world flying by so fast, so fast, so fast. She wasn't even breathing, not thinking anymore, just running and running from whatever was in the cave. At the top of the cliff, she almost fell. A quick stumble before she caught herself on a rock, cut her hand open, and gasped with the pain. As she righted herself, she glanced back over her shoulder, just one hasty look, and what she saw was almost enough to make her turn to stone right there. Should I stop there? I am going to stop there for just a minute and say, I bet you figured out what it was that was following her already, because you know the fairy tale. Do you know what it is? It's Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? And you recognized it, even though I've changed a whole lot of things from that fairy tale. Artie is really different from Goldilocks, and she's breaking into someone's house for a really different reason. And the bears are so much scarier than in the Goldilocks story, and there's a different number of them. But you still recognized kind of the heart of that story. You still saw what I was doing there. What I really wanted to get at in this story, in retelling this little piece, kind of hinting at the Goldilocks story, was the feeling of fear that Goldilocks has, and the feeling of not belonging. Because that's what Artie was feeling too. And I wanted the feeling of not knowing where your home is, and thinking you found it, and then realizing that it's not safe, because that's what Artie is feeling right then too. This book is about Artie and Putnam, these two right here, and their journey. And it's also about Raelle and her journey. And there are bears and other magical creatures and strange transformations and hidden worlds. But it is also about what it feels like when your home is not safe. And it's about how you might find a home that does feel safe and where you're loved. If you read A Tear in the Ocean, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.